Although we've made a lot of progress over the last century with medical advancements, we've arguably gone pretty backwards in terms of overall health. And this can surface as general low energy, type 2 diabetes, or difficulties losing weight. And I was recently gifted this book from 1923 called The Home Educator. And while flipping through it, I found a small section on so much nutritional and health wisdom that has been totally lost over the last century. Now, these few packed pages can be boiled down to 5 main healthy habits. And these are healthy habits that they used back in the day for kids and adults to make sure that they grew healthy and didn't have nutrient deficiencies. But at the same time, it translates really well to current days and with helping to achieve maximal health as well as body recomposition goals. And quite frankly, these are habits that we honestly really need to bring back. So let's dive into them. My name's Autumn. I'm a certified clinical nutritionist with my master's in nutrition human performance, and today's video is sponsored by Element. More on them in a bit. Okay, the first main category of healthy habit is proper amount and variety of food. Now, back then, the focus was hugely on preventing malnutrition. Diseases of poor nutrition were really apparent back then, like rickets, which is from low vitamin D levels, and that resulted in bones that were poorly formed or really weak and soft. And it started really young, so it was really apparent when it was happening. And because of that, people needed to correct for it right away. And this book noted with complete confidence the foods that will help to do that. And interestingly, science has proven them to this day that these are the foods that also we need for maximal health. The biggest focus they had was what they called tissue building foods. These are the foods that were the most nutrient dense that actually help to form healthy tissue for a growing body as well as for an adult's body. What we know this now is the foods that help to support lean mass, which is muscle mass, as well as bones because they do have a lot of the same needs. So this primarily included protein. That is the first thing that is mentioned. And quality was really important. In fact, it says some proteins are not very efficient building material, and for this reason, it is necessary that at least 60% of the protein supply for a child should come from animal sources, which is really crazy because this means back in 1923, they had some inkling of what we now know as the Diaz score. The Diaz score is a measurement of how efficiently a protein is used within our body. The higher the Diaz score, the better it is at actually acting as a protein. And because of that, these foods are also the best at helping support a body recomposition goal, which means you're losing body fat while keeping muscle mass, which this book specifically states to focus on milk, meat, cheese, eggs, and beans. And in terms of high Diaz score foods, if you're just boil it down to the absolute best, really it could just be that. Beans aside, which aren't as high Diaz, but all the rest, very high Diaz foods that help to support a body recomposition and a health goal. Now, it also goes into a ton of other information on like mineral matter, the focus on making sure you have enough iron and calcium, which is going to be from foods like milk. In fact, it mentions that you can get it from leafy greens, but for children especially, milk is one of the safest options. And because of that, this book recommends up to a quart of milk per day for children up to 15 years old for the health of bones specifically, because remember, rickets was a big problem back then. But even to this day, we have a lot of issues with bone health, osteoporosis being a huge one, which is where our bones become porous and weak and fragile. And although it doesn't impact us as young, it makes the later years of life so much more difficult. So eating these foods that provide the necessary nutrients can not only help us when we're younger, but also as we age, which is very important, especially now. Something that I thought was extra interesting in this category is it does talk about ultra processed foods, although it doesn't use this terminology. So they call it energy giving foods, where it provides energy or what we know as calories, but it doesn't provide any nutrient value in terms of those vitamins and minerals. It phrases it as very cheap and attractive desserts, foods that are very easy to eat a lot of. And it quotes that the danger is usually not that we shall lack energy foods, but that we shall use too large a portion of those which do not supply anything but energy, which is really just a nicer way of saying that it has no nourishment whatsoever. And this was a problem back in 1923. It's a bigger problem now because we're absolutely flooded with highly processed, overly processed foods that completely lack nourishment, which means that we're going to be deficient in these various vitamins and minerals that we need for optimal health and longevity. But also from a body recomposition perspective, these foods are very easy to overeat because they don't have any satiety factor. They don't raise our satiety hormones. They don't make us feel full and satisfied. They also don't provide the proper amount of protein to help prevent muscle loss, which means that we tend to lose muscle over time when we focus on these ultra processed foods, which can drastically lower the metabolic rate, make it harder to continue to lose weight, and makes it easier to gain fat over time. So focusing on those tissue building foods like it mentions in the 1923 book and avoiding those ultra processed or energy giving foods is habit number 1. And that's just the first habit. We have 4 others that are actually really mind blowing. But before we get into that, I want to give a huge thank you to today's sponsor, Element. Element is an amazing electrolyte company that was specifically created with intermittent fasting, low carb eating, and whole food eating in in mind. When you're eating less processed foods, often what happens is we actually eat a lot less sodium too. And sodium is a really important electrolyte for making sure that we're properly hydrated and making sure that we can actually send signals from our brain to the rest of our body. I love that Element doesn't have any sugar and they taste so great. Element comes in a lot of different flavors. My all-time favorite though is their grapefruit salt. It's so refreshing, especially on a hot day, but the other flavors like their raspberry and citrus and orange salt are also fantastic too. They even have a chocolate option that makes a great hot chocolate alternative. I usually have between 1 to 2 packets of Element per day, depending on my activity level or how hot it was. I just find that I feel so much more hydrated, so much more energized when I'm properly hydrated with Element. And right now, Element is offering my viewers a free sample pack with any order. That's 8 single-serve packets free with any Element order. It's a really great way to test out all 8 flavors, so you can get yours at drinkelement.com/autumn. It is only available through my link, so make sure to check out drinklmnt.com/autumn. The link is also in the description down below. Okay, the second healthy habit is sufficient fresh air and plenty of outside play. Starting off with a quote, the book says, "Indoor air is stale and full of contaminations. Outdoor is cooler, moving, and stimulates deep breathing, which is important for exchanging gases from the lungs." Deep breathing is also very important for turning off the fight or flight or stress mode that we have. Deep breathing stimulates our vagus nerve, which helps to reduce the stress hormone cortisol. And most of us are constantly go, 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 go. Whether it be our busy schedule or work days or rushing from one thing to the next, a lot of us are constantly living in this high cortisol stressed state. Even if you don't feel physically stressed, our body could be just flooded with cortisol. And balancing out cortisol levels is so important for achieving a body recomposition goal because high levels of cortisol are directly tied to weight gain around the belly, but also for making sure we get high quality deep sleep and making sure that we're living our healthiest lives. The other side of this is just being outdoors has other perks too. Not only does being outdoors help to expose our body to sunlight, which is really important for vitamin D production, it also helps to lower our stress hormone cortisol, but the air is generally going to be cleaner. EPA studies have found that the levels of pollutants that are indoors tend to be between 2 to 5 times higher than those outdoors. Occasionally, it can even be 100 times higher. So spending time outdoors obviously gives us fresh, clean air, as well as all of those other perks. And especially now compared to the 1920s, we probably spend way more time indoors. So taking the time to actually go outside, go for a walk, be in the sunlight can be really beneficial for overall health and wellness goals. Okay, the third healthy habit is an earlier bedtime. Again, with a quote here from the book, "Next to food, insufficient sleep seems to affect the general development and growth of the child most seriously. The nervous conditions of children is also greatly affected by lack of sleep and rest. Muscle recovery is greatly impaired from lack of sleep, which means if you are working toward a body recomposition goal, you're actually not even getting the benefits of your workout if you are not getting proper sleep. But when we get poor sleep, it can also increase our risk of insulin resistance. It also increases our hunger hormone, ghrelin, as well as makes our cravings really skewed toward hyper-palatable, sugary, sweet treats. On top of all of that, poor sleep can tend to increase anxiety levels too. This is something that I noticed early on during my whole wellness journey. I really suffered from high anxiety levels in high school and in college, and I found that when I actually focused on high quality deep sleep, my anxiety greatly improved. And especially now compared to back then, we have so many distractions that can make us not get good, high quality sleep or enough sleep. In fact, more than 25% of adults are getting less than 6 hours of sleep every single night. So making sure that we actually go to bed early enough to allow for enough sleep for that recovery and all of those health benefits as well can help with a long-term body recomposition goal as well as overall wellness and feeling great. Okay, the fourth healthy habit was something that I was surprised had so much of a focus on this. Like there are so many pages covering this, and it's on proper elimination, aka bowel movements. Again, starting with a quote, it says the habit of having a daily bowel movement at a regular time promotes health. The book really dives into the importance of sufficient bulk, which what they mean by that is fiber, and specifically vegetables, whole fruits, and certain whole grains, which their version of whole grains is a lot different than what our version is. They were specifically talking about making sure that the bran of grains was still intact. They also really highly focus on drinking enough water because they highlight that bowel movements is one way of our body removing toxins, which is actually very true. When our liver processes toxins, it releases it via a couple different methods. One is through our breathing, one is through our skin via sweat, and then the last is through bowel movements. And fiber is one of the things that helps to actually physically grab and hold on to those toxins that the liver has processed and released and remove it from the body. So without that daily bowel movement, then we could really not be removing the toxins efficiently. Plus, irregular bowel movements could be a sign of a lot of other health issues related to the gut, like IBS or SIBO. And this book really emphasizes the importance of making sure that you actually go to the bathroom once a day, preferably first thing in the morning. But sadly, it's very common not to have a consistent schedule. In fact, if you look at what's considered normal, it's anywhere between 3 times per day to 3 times per week, which is a huge variance and definitely not just that consistent 1 time per day. But if we go back to some of those core tenets, making sure that we actually focus on drinking enough water, having high quality sources of fiber, and not eating as much of those highly processed foods. But I would also add on top of that, focusing on 3 meals and not snacking throughout the day, because that does help us to stimulate the migrating motor complex, which is a series of contractions within the GI tract that actually helps to push out left behind food and bacteria and stimulate a bowel movement. From my experience, those tools with various clients has been really, really helpful. Okay, and the 5th habit from 1923 is correct posture and muscular development. Now, posture back then was also very highly focused on because of the incidence of rickets and poor forming bones and stature. Now, rickets is less common, but that doesn't mean that poor posture has gone away. The book from 1923 specifically talks about how poor posture can lead to a lot of issues related to the internal organs, specifically around breathing. It references something that they call the debutante slouch, which is where your chest is kind of like caved in and your belly kind of pokes out. So it's almost like almost like an S. Yeah, like an S kind of. They discuss how that type of posture can really crush the lungs and make it so it's difficult to have proper breathing, which has those downstream negative impacts. The book talks about proper alignment, making sure that our head is in line with our shoulders, in line with our rib cage, in line with our hips and our feet, which as a daughter of a chiropractor, I can say that that is something I've heard my entire life as well. And probably most people, myself included, would have thought of poor posture as more of an etiquette thing, but it is so important for health. In fact, this book is not too far off from the idea of it crushing your organs. You guys might have seen in one of my recent videos, I talked about how I switched to a standing desk for this exact reason, because I noticed that I was slouching at my desk and it was really impairing my breathing, which would cause me to feel a little bit more anxious because not getting those deep breaths led to more of that consistent state of fight or flight. Plus, having poor posture can really inactivate the core, lead to back issues and just general pain, and make day-to-day activities more difficult and less enjoyable, especially with everyone sitting at their desk, but also looking over their phone. You might have heard of this phenomenon called the tech neck, and you've seen it too, but I'm going to just demonstrate it. What you see is people's neck almost like parallel to the ground because they're looking down at their phone, which can obviously cause a lot of those same issues related to pain and posture down the line. But focusing on that correct posture, making sure that our head is in line with our shoulders and our rib cage and our hips and our feet can help us to promote that deep breathing, get our body out of the state of fight or flight, and just avoid a lot of unnecessary pain. Now, this book really dove into the healthiest possible foods you could eat to support a body as well as a body recomposition goal. And there's recent research that has really backed that up. In fact, there are 11 of the healthiest foods that science has found. If you want to check those out, you can find it with this video right here. Also, if you're new to my channel and you love this science-backed information, make sure you subscribe right here. Come out new videos every Tuesday and Thursday. All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in my next video.